Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The City of Lethbridge is looking at potentially extending the mandatory face covering bylaw until the end of the year. The Government of Alberta announced it will be investing more than $68 million to help seniors during the pandemic. And we hear from Major Don Blayton with the Salvation Army, who discusses how they're equipped to help those suffering from depression and anxiety during these uncertain times.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The mandatory face covering bylaw for the City of Lethbridge could be extended until December 31st. That is almost an entire year. The potential extension of the bylaw will be discussed at the February 11th Community Safety Standing Policy Committee meeting. Now, the original mandate was introduced in August 24th of last year. Some City of Lethbridge councillors have been outspoken and divided on the issue. Bridge City News spoke with councillors Blaine Higgin and Rob Miyashiro to get their thoughts about a potential extension to the bylaw.
I'd like to see us have a strong masking, hand washing, social distancing, keep promoting that all the time. Until such time as most of the people in our province have received at least the first vaccine, if not even both.
Following the guidelines and taking advice from our Chief Medical Officer of Health, I'll be very honest. I may not be happy with as long as this is going, because I'm businesses out there are hurting, and it spirals off to, I know we're talking about masks, but just with all the different restrictions that are in place, it's really a struggle for local businesses to survive.
Now, regardless of the municipal bylaw, there's still a provincial face mask requirement for indoor public spaces that was implemented last year. The United Way of Lethbridge in southwestern Alberta received a generous donation of $300,000 worth of personal protective equipment. Bianca Armour's Liquidation Centre donated the items as a message of goodwill during the COVID-19 pandemic. Conley Tate Mitchell is the Marketing and Communications Coordinator for the United Way of Lethbridge, and she says that these items will help cover over 60 charities throughout the city.
Our United Way received between $25,000 and $30,000 worth of items. So that included 60 cases of masks, 60 cases of sanitizer, and again, thousands of other pieces of PPE. So it's amazing. Really thankful to Bianca Moore and her company for doing this. It's so important to work together to get COVID-19 under control, and we're really thankful for the support that they have given.
Tate Mitchell says this donation allows organizations in our city to continue their program safely with the continuous work of staff helping clients. Alberta Health Services is warning about a COVID-19 vaccine scam targeting seniors. It says people are receiving phone calls telling them that they can book a vaccine shot if they pay for it. The government agency says it would never ask people to pay for COVID-19 immunization, and if people receive such a call, they should contact police immediately. Alberta's vaccination plan has been delayed due to shortages of vaccine from drug makers that are supplying the federal government. Alberta saw a bit of an increase as to the amount of new COVID-19 infections reported, with 582 new cases. There are currently 517 people in hospital due to the novel coronavirus, including 93 in intensive care. Sadly, there were 13 new COVID-19 related deaths. There are currently 6,588 active cases in the province. Fortunately, 117,400 Albertans have now recovered from the novel coronavirus. As for doses of COVID-19 vaccine, so far 112,388 have been given out in Alberta. Health officials say 21,794 Albertans have now been fully immunized with 2 doses. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dean Henshaw, says as for the new variant, government interventions in place are stopping the virus from spreading throughout the province.
We are currently able to test almost every single positive COVID case for variant strains. And so that does help us detect more that are out there so that we can contain them. And it's important to remember that the reason that these new variants are of concern is because of their increased potential for spread. So when we're able to identify them, we can put interventions in place to prevent that from happening. And again, we have seen in several places that while we've identified the variant, we have not seen further spread onward because of the interventions that are in place.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney and Health Minister Tyler Shandro recently announced $68.5 million in funding for seniors to combat the pandemic. The money will go towards supporting long-term care facilities and mental health initiatives. Video journalist Ainsley O'Reilly spoke with local senior services about the impact this money could have right here in Lethbridge.
The province is giving $48 million to non-contracted licensed supportive living operators. Another $9.6 million will head to home care providers and about $1 million to community hospices.
Every little bit helps. Does it help in the way that we think that things can move ahead a lot better? I think it's not a lot of money, but it helps.
The average age of those who have died from COVID-19 in Alberta is 82, and 2/3 of all deaths have been residents of long-term care facilities.
I think we need more. I think we need more assistance for some of these organizations, whether they're a private business or they're not, especially when they're serving vulnerable seniors.
Residential addiction and mental health facilities will also receive about $10 million. Seniors are more isolated than ever. Keep in Touch Lethbridge, a program that connects isolated seniors over the phone with volunteers, received funding into 2022 and is working to serve rural communities.
Oftentimes we forget about the small towns or the farmers that are out there and need support as well.
Volunteer Lethbridge coordinators say weekly phone calls go a long way.
It's so rare that I get a negative comment. They comment about how wonderful it is to have that person calling them weekly. It's wonderful to see the difference in how much the relationship means to them and how well it's going.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Did you know that 9 out of 10 Canadians have at least one risk factor for heart disease or stroke? Recent stats also say that 80% of premature death from these illnesses can be avoided by adopting healthier lifestyle choices. The Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada designates February as Heart Month, and they do so because it's the time of year when physical activity is usually at a minimum.
When it comes to physical activity, Heart and Stroke recommends accumulating 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per week, but that's just in bouts of 10 minutes or more. So just because you're working from home doesn't mean that you've got more time in your day. And so even when you're stuck working at your desk all day long, taking a stretching break for 10 minutes at lunch or walking around the block with your kids or your dog, making sure that if you have to tackle shoveling, which some of us unfortunately do have to do, just to be safe about it and, make sure that you stop if you feel any sort of pressure or pain in your chest. Just go easy at things like that, but that's still a perfectly valid form of physical activity. Eating a healthy diet, making water your drink of choice, and making sure that you've got half your plate at every meal filled with fruits and veggies, and trying to avoid those snack days, the cheat days of the highly processed food as much as possible.
For the first time in 70 years, Heart and Stroke's signature Heart Month fundraiser will not include door-to-door canvassing. Due to the pandemic, the event will be virtual this year. Lethbridge fire crews responded to a residential fire in the 1400 block of 11th Avenue North around 9 p.m. on Wednesday night. 7 units from 3 fire stations arrived to find a single-family home fully engulfed in flames. Crews quickly put out the fire while rescuing a resident through a basement window. The patient was taken to Chinook Hospital with undetermined injuries. Damage to the home is estimated at $375,000. The cause of the fire is under investigation. Many of us have found it very tough dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, being separated from those we love, or even losing our jobs. The Lethbridge Salvation Army says they've seen increased cases of depression and anxiety in many Albertans. Major Don Bladen says they're here and are equipped to help those who need it the most.
There seems to be a lot of juggling going on between different households and their needs, and of course not having children in school or in school and then out of school, and all of the issues that go with trying to work, trying to earn an income, trying to pay the bills, trying to look after your children while doing all of that. I could just imagine that is causing a lot of stress. And again, we're here to help as much as what we possibly can. So our goal is to alleviate some of those stresses in so much as it's possible.
Major Don Bladen will also discuss how he's had to rebuild his life since his home burned down last August. Catch that interview with Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our newscast. A Lethbridge business owner says his company called RentBridge didn't take off the way he had intended, so he changed the business to a new format. As Micah Quinn explains now, this new business will streamline the way people can list their items on sites like Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji.
Alexander Pizzuto had been working on RentBridge for 3 years, which is a site where the public can list items for rent in the community. Pizzuto says that since having its inception in August, 500 people signed up and 3,000 items made their way through the platform. Unfortunately, there wasn't a high enough demand for people to use it.
So rentals weren't happening with enough frequency to really justify us continuing. So while we're leaving the site up, like it's still available for people to use, however, we decided to shift our focus to kind of put the resources we have left into something that people actually really want. People are excited to use.
Pizzuto's newest invention, called SnapGrab, will help out people who want to list their items on selling sites, but don't want to deal with the hassle of having to list each item individually.
So the way SnapGrab works is you would actually list everything on our site, and then it creates almost like a mini store, and then you can click share to any of these sites. And so then it condenses that into one listing. So maybe you have 20 or 50 things that you have on the store. Well, it shows up as one listing on Facebook or one listing on Kijiji. And so it's more of you build it here and then you share it, and then it has kind of your overview picture, your description, and then a link where people can go and then they can purchase it on that site.
SnapGrab will have a test version starting on February 15th, and it will run until February 19th.
People have signed up, they're going to test it out, and then the whole goal is that we can just make sure everything's working as perfectly as we think it is, and make sure that we can fix those before releasing it, just kind of actually telling more people about it publicly in March.
To check out the new trial period, the public can go to rentbridge.ca/sneak peek. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Alberta government announced help for new business owners and unregistered sole proprietors today with an expansion to the Enterprise Relaunch Grant Program. New businesses that began operating between March and October of last year can now apply for COVID relief funding. The program, which launched at the end of June of 2020, has $500 million committed to the grants. In a release statement, Jobs and Economy Minister Doug Schweitzer had this to say. Even during the pandemic, Alberta saw around 10,000 new businesses open across the province in 2020. Entrepreneurs, whether new or experienced, need to know that Alberta's government is here to support them. The province, as of February 1st, they provided more than $327 million to more than 47,000 businesses. A new initiative at the University of Alberta will offer veterans an opportunity to transition to new careers. The province announced that it is funding the $714,000 pilot project over the next 2 years. It'll help provide veterans with on-campus supports and resources to build new careers once their service to our country has ended. Officials say students can begin accessing these services in the 2021-2022 academic year. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says Albertans should not worry that his government scrapped a policy that protected the Rocky Mountains from coal mining for more than 40 years. He says the government will not allow a mine to jeopardize the headwaters of rivers along the eastern slopes. The UCP is facing increasing pushback over its decision to revoke a policy that blocked open-pit coal mining on the eastern slopes and peaks of the Rockies. The decision, which opened up more than 1.4 million hectares to coal exploration, was made without public consultation. A popular UCP MLA and Cypress Medicine Hat says the Alberta government should focus on regional restrictions when it comes to keeping Albertans safe during the pandemic. Drew Barnes says a blanket approach should never be used. That's according to our legislative reporter, Tyler Dawson.
He's made a little bit of noise in the last couple of weeks about trying to get sort of regional restrictions, in areas that aren't as poorly hit or that have done better than Edmonton and Calgary in particular, still the hardest hit parts of the province, saying that, look, if cases are down in Medicine Hat or wherever, maybe they should be allowed to open some of their businesses. Maybe they should have a little bit more freedom and flexibility. Mr. Barnes has been making some waves all over the place recently, but that's something that's come up, and we'll have to see if we sort of go to that in any way, because sort of at the start of this, the Alberta government had this sort of zone approach to this thing that I found quite difficult to follow and complicated.
Catch the full interview with Tyler Dawson, Alberta correspondent with the National Post, coming up after business news. Ottawa's plan to let people write off working from home due to the pandemic could result in $260 million in lost tax revenue. The parliamentary budget officer says the number of people claiming a deduction for home office expenses is likely to skyrocket this year. He says more renters will file for deductions because they can claim the cost of rent. Yves Giroux says homeowners may opt for the simplified method and claim $400 because they cannot claim their mortgage or capital costs. Health officials in Manitoba say they're ready to begin delivering up to 20,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines starting next month. The medical lead for the vaccine task force says the plan calls for super sites in multiple cities, along with pop-up clinics going directly to targeted groups. Officials say, however, issues with supply mean the province does not know how many doses it will have to administer. Manitoba is reporting 125 new cases of the novel coronavirus, along with 3 additional deaths. There are 3,358 active cases in the province, including 260 in hospital with COVID-19. But fortunately, more than 25,000 Manitobans have recovered from the virus. Hurricane Dorian left behind massive destruction when it hit the Bahamas in 2019. It is one of the most intense tropical cyclones to ever hit the region, packing winds of 295 kilometers an hour and leaving more than 70,000 people homeless. Samaritan's Purse is currently in Sweeting's Key on Grand Bahama Island, helping to repair the water distribution system there.
The level of destruction here from Hurricane Dorian is really hard to believe at times. Entire houses wiped out completely. Communities really just devastated. Here we are, well over a year later, a lot of houses still completely destroyed. Water is very difficult to get, and the system here is in disrepair. Here in Sweeting's Key off the coast of Grand Bahama, working here with Samaritan's Purse on restoration of the distribution water mains. This is a great project. We're a number of weeks into the program now, and everything's going well.
Water is essential, and look at here. They are putting water miles in Sweeting's Key for the residents here, so I'm excited. I don't know how to say thanks to them, but I want you to know the work you're doing is extraordinary.
We are just so happy and so grateful for what these folks are doing here for the community of Sweeting's Key. Appreciate you so very much. Thank you.
3, 2, 1, 0.
SpaceX confirms that thanks to successful launch, 60 new Starlink satellites were deployed into orbit early Thursday. The satellites are part of an internet access system. The company says it plans on selling some of its satellites for military, scientific, or exploration purposes. In October of last year, the Federal Communications Commission submitted filings on behalf of SpaceX to arrange for 30,000 additional Starlink satellites to supplement the 12,000 satellites already approved by the FCC. This is Super Bowl weekend. The NFL championship game will be played Sunday between Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Bucks, taking on the defending champ Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, every year, many of us look forward to seeing the colorful Super Bowl commercials. The senior editor for Ad Age discusses why this year's Super Bowl advertisers are different from previous years and how that will impact the ad's content.
What if this could change the world?
A burrito.
Yeah.
You are so weird.
It could. It could change how we plant things, water things, grow things, pick things, move things, and transportation things.
What? That's not a thing.
We're seeing big name advertisers that we were used to seeing in the Super Bowl every year sit on the sidelines. Advertisers like Budweiser, Pepsi, Coke, Hyundai, Kia, they decided to sit out this year. And it's made room for a whole bunch of newcomers. Currently, there are about 12 confirmed to be in the game. You have brands like Fiverr, which is an online freelance marketplace, Scott's Miracle Grow, which of course with lawn care and gardening during the pandemic gaining in relevance, they decided to buy in this year. You even have diapers advertising in the Super Bowl for the first time with Huggies. So there are a lot of first timers that are getting in and finding an opportunity, perhaps even because their consumer base was growing during the pandemic. So you actually see more people really engaging with the ads and spending time watching the ads more so than in the past after the year that we've had and so much fear and anxiety and sadness, that it's really the goal during the Super Bowl to entertain, uplift, and to bring in some optimism.
Yeah, the Super Bowl will definitely look a lot different this year due to the pandemic. Well, we began the day with cold temperatures across much of southwestern Alberta. It warmed up a little, but colder temperatures and more of the white stuff is on the way. Full weather details are coming up. We had lots of cloud cover, but not that cool today in Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a look at the long-range weather forecast. Jeanette, fairly mild today, but things are about to change.
Yeah, they sure are, Hal. The temperature is about to drop and drop some more in time for the weekend. And even tonight, we're going to be getting a little bit of flurries. It should be clearing up a little bit overnight, and then into Friday as well, chance of flurries as well. This is where we're going to start to see this temperature drop here. -5 for Friday, -20 the overnight low on Friday night. Into Saturday, -18 the high. Chance of flurries both Saturday into Saturday night. Look at those overnight lows there too, -24. -21 the expected high on Sunday with mainly overcast skies. -19 the high on Monday. -20 for Tuesday and -14 on Wednesday. So our mercury is definitely plunging. Look at that overnight low on Monday night there too, -28. Yuck. I think it's fair to say that winter is here. We're certainly going to be getting out of this range, which is the seasonal averages for this time of year. Average high is 0, average low -12. We had a 17-degree day back in 1992. That was our highest on record. And in 1989, we have our chilliest day on record, -31. 7:59 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sun set this evening right at 5:31 p.m. Nice to see those days getting a little bit longer, even though we're still in winter. So over on the west coast tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud, windy in the Juan de Fuca Strait in Victoria there, 9 degrees the high, Vancouver rather. Cloudy and windy, 7 degrees the high, 2 to 5 centimeters of snow expected tomorrow in Edmonton, and about 2 to 4 centimeters expected in Calgary tomorrow. It's pretty chilly in Edmonton tomorrow, -18 compared to the -9 high in Calgary. -23 the high in Saskatoon with sunny skies, -20 in Regina, both of those cities. A risk of frostbite is possible, -16 the high in Winnipeg, and to the late morning and early afternoon is when they can see their flurry action beginning. In Toronto, a bit of flurries as well, 1 degree the high. About 5 centimeters of snow expected tomorrow in Ottawa, 2 degrees the high, and about 2 to 4 centimeters expected in Montreal with a 1 degree. So there's a little bit of snow and precipitation happening all over the place, including right here on the east coast. Fredericton could see showers or flurries developing tomorrow, 2 degrees the high, 2 also in Halifax. No snow there though. We're seeing some flurries happening in Charlottetown tomorrow with a high of 0 degrees. Rain expected with fog patches tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland with a high of 3 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Four Seasons Home Comforts, experts in heating, AC, and fireplace install and repair.
Air Canada is grounding its fleet of Rouge aircraft indefinitely and laying off 80 employees beginning on Monday. The airline does say, however, that brand will remain part of the company's overall strategy. Canadian Airlines have suspended all flights to Mexico and the Caribbean at the request of the federal government, and most of Air Canada's flights to the region were operated by Rouge. General Motors says its Kami Auto plant in southern Ontario will be idle for a week. A worldwide shortage of computer chips is plaguing the auto industry. GM says the measure will affect all shifts next week at its plant in Ingersoll. Local union workers have been informed of a temporary layoff at the plant from February 8th through the 13th. GM says around 1,500 affected hourly employees will be eligible for layoff benefits. The automaker says its plants in Kansas and Mexico will also have downtime, and a plant in South Korea will move to half capacity. Canada Goose Holdings says revenue grew in its third quarter for the first time since the start of the pandemic, but profits declined 9% from a year earlier. The luxury parka maker says the global strength of its brand and digital business returned the company to growth, and revenue up nearly 5% to $474 million. Suncor Energy is reporting a fourth quarter net loss of $168 million, or 11 cents per share. That is compared to a net loss of $2.34 billion, or $1.52 per share in the same period for 2019. The Calgary-based company says revenue totaled $6.6 billion. That is down from $3 billion from a year ago. Analysts say on average they were expecting revenue of $7.4 billion and a net loss of 1% per share for the quarter. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 126 points on the day to finish at 18,042. The Dow was up 332 to 31,056. The S&P 500 was up 41 points to 3872. And the Nasdaq was up 167 points on the day to 13,778. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 78 cents to 56.47 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 18 cents to 2.97 US. Gold was down 15 cents to $17.9388 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $26.35 US an ounce. Wheat is at $304 per metric ton, barley's at $307, canola's at $6.91, and corn is at $342 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 98 cents to $116.45, feeder cattle were up 98 cents to $139.50, and lean hogs were down $1.35 to $71.03. The Canadian dollar was unchanged over the past 24 hours at $77.97 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Health Services is warning about a COVID-19 vaccine scam targeting seniors. It says people are receiving phone calls telling them that they can book a vaccine shot if they pay for it. The government agency says it would never ask people to pay for COVID-19 immunization, and if people receive such a call, they should report it to police immediately. The Salvation Army says it is equipped to help those who've been dealing with depression and anxiety during the COVID-19 pandemic. Major Don Bladen will have details next in an informative interview with Jeanette Rocher. That Q&A is on deck.
As the COVID pandemic continues, the economy struggles and job losses and COVID restrictions take their toll on families and individuals. It places greater pressure on local charitable groups. Joining me to discuss this is Major Don Bladen with the Lethbridge Salvation Army. He's joining me via Skype from right here in Lethbridge. Welcome, Major Don.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
So, Major Don, COVID hasn't only impacted businesses, but it's changed things for outreach groups like yours as well. So how has this impacted the organization's finances? I know that the holidays are over, for example, but were you still able to meet the needs of our community over Christmas, like with the Kettle campaign or with the Christmas Hope campaign, for example, or was there a significant shortfall?
Yes, I think we had an exceptionally good Christmas, actually. We didn't surpass any goals by any stretch, but we did meet with all of the needs that came to us. And so with respect to our Christmas Kettle campaign, of course, that's typically a 5 or a 6 week campaign. We hope collectively with respect to our mail out, as well as, those that stand in the stores and collect money from people, passerbys. We're looking for about 250,000 total for the year. We got around 200, maybe slightly over 200. So we fell a little bit short in that regard. You just have to deal with these things as they come, and charities, not-for-profits, we're no exception to this COVID pandemic, and it's been a struggle for a lot of us. But we have an amazing community, we have amazing leadership, we have amazing philanthropy, and I can't thank the community enough for helping us to help others.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know recently they enabled electronic donations with the Christmas Kettle campaign. Did you think that helped at all a little bit?
To be honest, it wasn't terribly well received. It was spoken of quite highly, and I think people really liked the idea. But no, we didn't really glean a whole lot of donation from that platform. I think we'll continue to use it because I do think it is the way of the future. But it just might take us a while to get to where we need to be.
Right. I think it'll probably one of those things that'll catch on in the future more.
Hope so.
Yeah. And then what about Christmas Hope campaign? What was your involvement in that? It was a collaborative effort, right?
Yes, that's been going on for a few years. And so, we start off with kicking off at City Hall, and the mayor lights the Christmas tree, and we sort of collectively talk about what our goals and ambitions are for the year. The Salvation Army is a part of this endeavor as it relates to the distribution of toys. And so, we let the food banks handle the food element, and we collaborate on the toy element. And we do our very best to be as generous as what we possibly can be. And this year was no exception. We had to change our delivery model up a little bit because of COVID, but, we've got a lot of really good feedback, and there were a lot of happy people. And, I think all things considered, although we couldn't have a lot of personal contact with people, which is what we prefer, we nonetheless had a lot of success. So we'll see what the future holds in that regard. I can't see us being in any way getting used to being so distant from people in our ministry delivery. I really think it needs to get back to some semblance of warm embrace and so forth. But by and large, it went well.
That's great to hear. Now, the Salvation Army thrift store has closed, and I'm guessing this was a source of ministry finances as well. So what happened there? Is the closure due to COVID, and is this a permanent closure, or will it possibly reopen once things get back to some kind of normal?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. When I first came into the community about 2.5 years ago, I started doing a lot of assessment as to how well things were working. And, the thrift store, it became evident to me, needed a lot of attention and needed a lot of work. And, we have had great leadership and a great run for a lot of years in this community, but we got to a point where we were spending a lot more than what we were able to bring in. And the unfortunate part about dealing with those types of situations is, you have to start scaling back. You have to start retooling. Um, yeah, we were in the process of doing that and doing that quite well without impacting a lot of our employees, but then COVID hit. And, we essentially had a building that we were paying, a lot of rent, lease costs on, a lot of maintenance costs on, and it just wasn't doable. And so we had to make the tough decision to close. But with that being said, the closure was temporary and is temporary. And we are in the process now of wanting to amalgamate or put under one roof our community and family services work. In other words, our client intake and all that we do to help the needy and the working poor in our community into the same building as what our thrift store would typically function out of. So by bringing those two things together, we can really scale down to a degree where it becomes a lot more cost effective. And yet at the same time, we can really start to focus on what it means to bring a thrift store ministry as a community and family services expression together with the actual family services area. And so by bringing them together, I think we can be a lot more effective in service delivery. We can be a lot more cost effective. We can be a lot more ethical in terms of the donations that are given and how we use them and distribute them. And yeah, I think there's some great days ahead of us. We anticipate opening late summer, early fall. Right now, unfortunately, we're in the middle of a lot of sort of construction conversation about how this whole thing needs to look. The money is there. We just simply need to make sure we use it in a very precise, exact way.
Yeah, well, we look forward to having that open again and open better, right? With more purpose there, absolutely. Now, the Salvation Army serves people in need, of course, including those who are homeless and those who are struggling with addictions. So what kinds of challenges are these people dealing with because of COVID and the associated restrictions?
Yeah, it's difficult for me from a Salvation Army platform in Lethbridge to really speak to that because we don't run an addictions facility here, and we don't deal, day to day with, the ground level work of addictions rehabilitation in this community. We're a supporting partner for those who do, and so I can't really speak to to the impact from a personal perspective. But I'm like you, right? I watch the news, I follow social media, I talk to people in that particular area of service, and yeah, it's a tough situation. It really is. The addictions issue has always been a major issue, and I think to a degree, although I don't have statistics to sort of go down that road, I do think that it's continuing to be a really difficult problem for people to address.
Absolutely. We hear stories that some homeless people have been avoiding shelters for fear of catching COVID, which can potentially put them in more dangerous situations.
Yes, I don't have any semblance of medical expertise, but I can just imagine how difficult it really is to, to deal with that kind of a situation in a facility where it's inevitable there's going to be people coming into close proximity with others. It's unavoidable. So I respect the health authorities. I respect those who are dealing in this field of interest, and to deal with these issues have to be monumental. And so I will support in any way I possibly can, and we will do as much as what we possibly can within our scope of ministry.
Right. And I don't know if your scope of ministry covers over it, but there are folks that don't have roofs over their heads and they still have those financial struggles. And some people have lost jobs or are working fewer hours these days. So what are the needs and how are you able to offer assistance to them, or are you able to?
Yeah, we have opened up our community and family services building, or at least a portion of it, until construction begins, to provide for a drop-in type scenario where we have a number of different sort of household articles, food items, even some clothing items for people to sort of take a look at. And if there's a need in any of those areas, of course, we try to meet that need. We're serving a lot of new arrivals to Canada, a lot of immigrant families and those people that are trying to establish. And I'm finding that our numbers are increasing by the week, actually. So each and every day when I talk to the lady who does the intake for us, she says, oh yeah, we've had 22 or 24 or 25 or 26 people today, and the vast majority of them again are newcomers to Canada. So we see there's a real opportunity and a real niche there to be able to sort of enter in and help as much as what's possible. And again, going back to that merging of our thrift store community and family services, we're entering into an initiative called Pathway of Hope. And that Pathway of Hope initiative is really meant to begin to work very specifically and acutely with people who have very unique needs, that we could not only give them a handout, but essentially a hand up. And that's really the goal of our ministry, is to walk alongside of people and to really get to know them, to get to understand what their needs are, and to really see them move out of whatever semblance or whatever level of poverty they might find themselves in. And maybe even not even using the word poverty, whatever area of need they may have, just helping them to address it in productive ways. And so, yeah, we have a lot of great plans, and we have to sort of put those things together. We have to hire a person that is really capable and equipped in some of these areas of giftedness to help us do that. And so we have a lot of plans for the next few months.
That's excellent. And as you're getting to know these people, are you noticing a higher degree of levels of depression and domestic violence due to the COVID restrictions?
I have not really experienced that personally myself, although I do read the headlines, and I do again speak to people who are, invested in those areas of interest. And yeah, there seems to be a lot of stress out there. There seems to be a lot of juggling going on between, different households and their needs, and of course, not having children in school or in school and then out of school, and all of the issues that go with, trying to work, trying to earn an income, trying to pay the bills, trying to look after your children while doing all of that. I could just imagine that is causing a lot of stress. And again, we're here to help as much as what we possibly can. So our goal is to alleviate some of those stresses in so much as is possible. Before COVID hit, we had a Tuesday evening program in our church where we had upwards of 45 at risk or vulnerable youth in our building. We would serve them a meal and provide them sort of a devotional or a learning opportunity, and to be able to interact with some of our leaders and some of our elders. And it really turned out quite well. And COVID hit, and all of that sort of practical ministry disappeared. So we thought to ourselves, we have to continue to try to meet. And so what we've done is we've delivered meals to their homes. We've delivered devotions to their homes on a couple of occasions, and we plan to do that again real soon. And so, yeah, there's this ongoing sort of adjustment to continue to care for the needs of these incredibly vulnerable people. And in our case, what was already established really enables us to do that and to do it well. We're also doing another program here shortly. It's going to be a one-day virtual event that my wife is leading with a team of really great leaders, and it's called Brave. And that's a full day where vulnerable young girls, from 12 to 18 to 20 years old, are going to come together virtually, and we're going to deliver some gifts or some swag bags, as my wife would call them, to their home, and invite these girls to be a part of this Brave event where they can not only get to know each other a little better, but be given some tools to help them understand their worth and their value, and some of the risks that are present for them in today's world. And so, yeah, I can't say enough about how difficult it is to deliver ministry, but yet how ingenious we are when we get together and we put our minds and our resources together to help people in need. And so we continue to do that day to day, and we're just always looking for new initiatives and new ways to do that well.
Ugh, that's absolutely wonderful to hear. Now, before we wrap up here, I have to, of course, address this. Major Don, you're no stranger to tough times yourself. So right in the middle of this pandemic, this past summer, your house burnt down, and that must have been devastating. How did you cope with that, and what's happening now?
Yeah, as you sort of introduced this topic, I felt my body sort of adjust to the stress that I'm feeling inside. And so I don't really know how to put it all together in exact words to really get, it across to people, how we're doing. But let me just focus maybe on the good. God has provided for us in some incredible ways. There are people who have stepped up and have come alongside in very tangible ways, both from the Christian community, the non-Christian community, the faith community at large, and people all the way down in the United States have reached out to us and said, hey, we know somebody who knows you and we've heard what's happening. Yeah, so I can't say enough about how community responds to true need. And I think people are pretty discerning in that regard. They know when people are going through tough times. Now, I don't just hand this over to, human ingenuity. I give the glory to God because God has his hand in all of this. I will never leave you or forsake you, he says, right? And so that has to be true in both the good and the bad times. And so when something as devastating as this house fire happens to anybody, let alone us, my first go-to is God, is the Lord. Lord, what are you trying to show me in this? And I've been doing a lot of reading on folk who have gone before me in the Christian faith, who have endured some incredibly difficult times, only, to look back on their story and say, it's absolutely incredible how God has used these things to bring us closer to him. And so just when we think, right, that he's, far away or distant or not even remotely close, he sort of taps us on the shoulder and says, I've been here all along. So I'm just so incredibly thankful. Without using a lot of scripture, without getting all preachy or pastoral, all I can say is God's been amazing. God's people have been amazing. Everybody we're working with in this regard, even though there's an incredible amount of stress and anxiety and emotion involved, I still wake up each morning with a smile on my face because I have my life, I have my wife, and I have my beautiful dog who just happened to be with us in the office the day of the fire. So I don't think there's anybody on planet Earth who can convince me there is no God.
That's
Not true.
amazing. So many people in that situation might even blame him and say, like, God, why did you do this? But it's interesting to see your reaction to that. And I just absolutely love that. And thanks so much for all that you do, Major Don. Don Bladen is the major for the Lethbridge Salvation Army. And we're so happy that you were able to join us today.
Thank you so much for giving me the time.
As you've heard on Bridge City News, the Government of Alberta will be loosening some restrictions fairly soon, February 8th, including one-on-one training in gyms. To talk about this in more detail is our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, joining me once again from Edmonton. Tyler, with the presence of the COVID-19 variants, health officials say the virus may be with us for quite some time, so we shouldn't expect for things to return to normal for a little while. What will that normal actually look like, though, right?
Yeah, the thing about the variants is that we haven't seen sort of widespread spread, I guess, of the variants in Alberta just yet. There have been cases, but we're not talking nearly the same numbers of cases as the original. But it seems to be part of the concern is how much quicker these variants might transmit, whether or not vaccinations are going to be as effective against them. So it sort of leaves open this question from a policy perspective, but also for everyone living in Alberta, of even with these relaxations. We had hair salons a couple weeks ago, nice new free pandemic haircut here, and we have gyms opening up to some extent. But so the government and health officials have been hinting that depending on what happens with these variants, some of these restrictions we've been living with for a few months now may persist for some time yet.
Yeah, and we could have 6 people at a table at a restaurant again, so we can finally get together with more of our family, which would be nice to see. starting February 8th. Medicine Hat Cyprus MLA Drew Barnes is in the news again, discussing why more regionalized measures are needed when it comes to government restrictions, and Tyler, not the blanket approach for everyone.
Yeah, he's made a little bit of noise in the last couple weeks about trying to get sort of regional restrictions, in areas that aren't as poorly hit or that have done better than Edmonton and Calgary in particular, still the hardest hit parts of the province, saying that, look, if cases are down in Medicine Hat or wherever, maybe they should be allowed to open some of their businesses. Maybe they should have a little bit more freedom and flexibility. Mr. Barnes has been making some waves all over the place recently, but that's something that's come up, and we'll have to see if we sort of go to that in any way, because sort of at the start of this, the Alberta government had this sort of zone approach to this thing that was, I found, quite difficult to follow and complicated. As things sort of flatten out, maybe we'll return to that, but as with everything else in this pandemic, it's just wait and see at this point.
Mr. Barnes has also been arguing for an independence referendum for the spring of 2023, saying that should be the next move if a majority of Albertans vote yes on a referendum on equalization that'll happen sometime this spring. Barnes says Albertans need a stronger hand in negotiating a better deal.
That's right. So Barnes was on the Fair Deal panel that viewers will recall that sort of went around the province a year ago now. It's so hard to keep track of this. With the pandemic's messed with my whole sense of time. But anyways, he was on this panel and he sort of put out a number of statements over the past little while saying that, look, if we're going to negotiate a fair deal with the federal government, we can't just have a carrot. We need a carrot and a stick. And for him, an independence referendum is part of that negotiating position. So he said that this week, and then Premier Jason Kenney was asked about this at a press conference on Wednesday, and he said sort of the same thing he's always said. He said, look, the UCP is a pro-Canada party, a pro-federalism party. The UCP voters and base signed on to that. So he's not really willing to play these games. Barnes, of course, replying and saying that this is a necessary step that needs to be taken if we're going to negotiate some sort of deal with Ottawa. So, Drew Barnes, one MLA, certainly we're not seeing a large fracture within the UCP about this sort of thing, but, it's still a subject of concern. It's still something people are talking about. 2 years into this UCP government's mandate.
Drew Barnes is very popular in southeastern Alberta, Medicine Hat, Cypress County. But do you think if he keeps pushing about the independence issue, that maybe eventually Jason Kenney will say, you know what, I want you to sit as an independent, get kicked out of caucus?
Well, it could end up there, but I think to some extent Jason Kenney is dealing with a little bit of a threat from his right, whether or not you consider independence to the right of the UCP or not. His polling numbers are relatively low at this point. He's struggled with popularity during the pandemic, no doubt about that. I think he's in a position where he probably doesn't want to upset certain segments of the UCP, not necessarily even the base, but people who would vote UCP. We are seeing the growth in some of these other sort of conservative right-wing parties. And, do I think that they're going to form, the Wild Rose Independence Party is going to form government? No. But I think he probably wants to guard that right flank a little bit and make sure that he's not seeing too many voters defect in terms of fundraising, in terms of votes, in terms of whatever. So, as a tactical move, I'm not sure he'd want to do it. And I should say the other benefit to Kenney being able is that when Barnes brings this up, Kenney can then turn around and sort of tamp down on these fires a bit. And it makes it harder for his opponents to say, oh, you're a separatist, you're going to take Canada out or Alberta out of Canada and things like that.
Right. The province expanded its COVID-19 supports with $625 to help people isolate, and the funding will really help First Nations people both on and off the reserve and to those living in Métis settlements. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, that's right. So that's basically the gist of it. The province has put in place these isolation supports basically for people who need to quarantine. Perhaps they need to go to a hotel because they live in a communal gathering or a multi-generational household. This money is meant to just sort of smooth that over, make it easier for people to isolate, not just make it easier and less stressful for them, but also literally give them a way to do it so that they don't have to go to work and things like that, because not everyone could take 2 weeks off work to isolate. So that's how that works. And then the other thing that's happened quite recently on Wednesday, in fact, is the government announced a whole bunch more money, about $68.5 million to go to continuing care and long-term care facilities, hospices, places like that, sort of recognizing the added strains on that part of the healthcare system. And this is for PPE, this is for, screening, these sorts of things. So, just a couple more supports that have come as we continue to slowly work our way through the pandemic.
Tyler, 8 communities in our province have expressed concerns about changes to the government rules that allow coal mining. They include us here in Lethbridge, Canmore, Longview, and Turner Valley. And the Blood Tribe has also said it'll be fighting the changes in court.
Yeah, that's right. So what this is there was a policy under, I believe, the Peter Lougheed government about coal mining on the eastern slopes of the Rockies. So about a 45-year-old policy, give or take. The UCP has sort of walked that back, and they've granted sort of exploration leases to the area. So that doesn't mean we're going to see open pit coal mines, in the eastern slopes just yet. But it does mean that companies can go in and try and find places where they might mine. So there's been a pretty significant backlash from this. Corb Lund and Paul Brandt, the country music stars from Alberta, spoke out against this. This led to the cancellation of some of these leases by the UCP, but the majority of them, certainly sort of the geographic majority of them, do still remain. So, as you say, the mayors have spoken out. Kenny was on the radio on Wednesday morning talking about this and said people sort of need to respect coal workers and understand the industry. Again, like the pandemic, not an issue that I see going away anytime soon here. He's been being asked a lot of questions about it. He's got mayors asking him about it. It's going to be, I think, a political hot potato for the next little while.
It must be tough for the Premier as well, because on one hand, you have to create jobs, to get the economy stimulated, get people working. But on the other hand, you're impacting the environment, and which may also impact, with these coal mines, impact our water supplies. So it's kind of a fine line. He's put in a kind of a tough spot here.
Mm-hmm. He is. And the other thing that I didn't mention, is these communities are all sort of downstream of where these projects might be. So that's sort of the specific concern, is what this might do to water in these communities.
Many people in the Alberta energy sector, Tyler, are still stunned that the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline expansion, with U.S. President Joe Biden pulling the presidential permit. Premier Kenny is hinting that there may be a legal case for the Alberta government and TC Energy to get their money back.
Yeah, he sort of hinted at this in a Facebook Live this week, saying that they're exploring their options to try and recover the money that's been put into the project, as you say, both by TC Energy and by the Alberta government. What that might look like, I don't know if anyone knows just yet. There's been some speculation about what options are available out there, and a lot of the commentary, I would say, has not been, let's say, optimistic towards the government's position. But he is still talking about it. And the other thing on that front, just more goes to show that Keystone XL will never not be part of our lives, is that the NDP is still pushing to see the details of the financial agreement, I guess, between the Alberta government and TC Energy. And this came up in committee recently, and the UCP sort of blocked the NDP motion and brought in their own motion that was a little bit less robust, let's say. The UCP motion basically excluded anything that would have been sort of confidential business type stuff. Obviously, the NDP wants to see that because that would give more information about it. So I think that's another thing that's going to be ongoing for a while here, especially in the legislature. It's good question period fodder. It's good politicking for the opposition to try and get the details of this because, at this point, we don't actually know an exact dollar figure on how much Albertans could be paying into this project.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how much did we actually invest ahead of time? Knowing that there's a potential of a different administration in the United States, which happened with Biden taking over and yanking the presidential permit. Was it over $1 billion, like $1.2 billion of taxpayers' dollars, Alberta taxpayers' dollars invested?
Yeah. The number that sticks in my mind is 1.5 billion put up, but then there's also several billion more in guarantees of some sort, I believe is sort of how it's been described. So that, I think, is where people are sort of unsure about what is going to happen, because it's not like we bought it, like the federal government bought the Trans Mountain expansion, but we did sort of backstop it in some way. And so, maybe those details aren't even sorted out yet, but no doubt politicians making noise about this and they want to know.
And we can't forget about the over 1,000 Albertans who lost their jobs as well as a result of the permit being yanked here. Tyler, the police were called to the Alberta legislature on Monday thinking there may have been a bomb. What happened there?
That's right. It's not a whole lot to it. They were bomb threat. They came down and they found that it was a box of spent fireworks. Like I couldn't. Maybe were there fireworks at New Year's? I don't even know. I feel like this year's been so different that it's hard to imagine where those would have come from. But yeah, bomb threat that turned out to be fireworks at the Alberta legislature. So a little bit of not lighter news per se, but certainly not as dramatic as the Keystone XL pipeline cancellation, I suppose.
Tyler, Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips is back in the news again, and it involves 2 police officers here in Lethbridge. Tell me more.
Yeah, so this originated from, I believe, in 2017 when Shannon Phillips was at a restaurant having a meeting, something to do with the Castle Region Park, I believe. And there were 2 Lethbridge police officers who were there who sort of kept track of who she'd met with, what they were talking about, and had posted about it on Facebook. Now, Shannon Phillips put in a complaint about this, and that was investigated by the chief and I believe dismissed. Now, the other side of this, and that's where it gets a little bit tricky and is what is happening right now, is there's also an investigation going on about accessing police records about this, some sort of search being done by the police. Now, one of the people has been demoted for doing these improper searches. And so Shannon Phillips was basically pushing to have these complaints, which were being dealt with separately, she wanted them sort of put together. So she's been able, so that has happened, and she's now able to appeal the decisions that have been made in that sort of side of this instance. So it's a little bit of sort of tricky inside baseball on, you know, police enforcement and rules and things like that. But it all sort of stems from this one incident where she was sort of being watched by members of the Lethbridge Police Service.
Should be interesting to see how that plays out. Our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, thanks again for joining me from Edmonton.
Always a pleasure, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.